First, I just want to say thank you to everybody for being here. It means so much to us. So thank you for everyone in attendance this evening. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Great. A man named Larry recently came to Arise Chicago. He worked at a hospital for several years and began having eye issues caused by the detailed work of his job. When his employer discovered this, Larry was immediately fired after over a decade of service to the hospital. Larry went to his pastor after this had happened and asked him to pray for his well-being. The pastor said he would, but also told Larry he needed to visit Arise Chicago. After coming to us and learning his rights, he won his case with the National Labor Relations Board to be rehired, along with the full back wages he should have received and so justly deserved. There are countless stories like this that we've seen at Arise over the last 2 years, and I love being an Ariser. But it is easy to forget that these fond memories are wedded to the terrible realities of the workers who arrive seeking support. The fact that here in Cook County, over $1 million is stolen through underpayment and non-payment of wages from low-wage workers every day proves just how enormous this problem is. I hear people who say, I'm paid on Thursday and I'm out of money on Thursday. And yesterday I worked for 6 hours but was paid for only 2. But what is even worse is the bombardment of messages that those asking for basic human rights, such as representation in the workplace and a living wage for a day's work, are nothing but the poverty they live in. That their poverty is caused by a lack of ambition or personal irresponsibility. But we see that in our country, the average worker who would be impacted by an increase in the minimum wage earns half of his or her family's total income, while the United States spends more money on defense than the next 10 countries combined. Yet we can't afford to aid the poor or raise the minimum wage. When these types of injustices are happening around us, we are called to take a stand. To take a stand that working for justice and mercy toward the poor and outsiders is non-negotiable. It is the foundation of our faith. And this work of justice is inherent in what it means to be a Dominican, to have a Bible in one hand and a newspaper in the other, to study the world and allow the brokenness in our world to forever change us. For the Arisers, our work is to, as the verse in Isaiah that inspired our name states, arise, shine, for our light has come and the glory of the Lord is upon us. The task to bring the glory of the Lord to all is not for some time in the future, in the heaven up in the sky, but in the here and now, in this place. To create a world that would be wholly pleasing to God, service is essential, but I believe it to be only the first step. It is not the amount of work that we do or the number of people that we serve, but it is our willingness to form community, to position ourselves in communion with those who are excluded. And I think that far too often we see our places of gathering, such as our workplaces, schools, and congregations, as spaces that ought to be permanently sealed with the good people in, and so those who don't deserve it, or those who are considered unworthy, are left outside. But our gospel invitation is to throw open our doors and never shut them to anyone who wishes to enter. When we do this, we become a living sign of the love of our God who made us and experience a conversion of our heart, soul, and mind. A conversion that affirms that our work cannot be guided by the principle that most should not have to live in poverty, or even that the vast majority should not have to live in poverty, but that no one should have to live in poverty. For Jesus did not come to start an institution, but a movement. And if we turn to the God who is living in the here and now, we must assess our priorities. For I fear that perhaps we must ask ourselves if we do not show greater respect and are more reverent to an image of God made of wood than we are to human beings, the living images of God. And in our society, when a proposed national budget takes 69% of its budget cuts from programs of low to moderate incomes, or that nearly 25% of those on food assistance work full or part-time, it is clear that some people have more value, are worth more than others. And because of this, when a refugee from Iraq confronted her employer about being paid $40 for a 12-hour shift, she was burned with hot oil and pinned to the ground while being beaten in the face. But after visiting Arise and learning her rights, she led a delegation to stand up to her employer to demand this never happen again. And it has not. And when a man expressed to his boss he had not been paid for his construction job, he was reported to Immigration and Customs Enforcement to be placed in deportation proceedings with a sick wife and 2 teenage daughters at home. When we at Arise were alerted of this, we worked to obtain a stay of deportation and eventually freed him from detention. The Arisers are creating an alternative narrative to what is currently happening in our world. A narrative that asserts money and value are inherently separate because no life is worth less or has less value than any other. The great challenge I have been presented with these past 2 years is not only to work for justice and peace, but to be justice and to be peace. It is the challenge that the service model of service provider and service recipient is not enough. It is important. But if our ministry stops here, we lose out not only on the challenge of the gospel message, but on the joy of it. We are called to bridge the gap between the haves and the have-nots, to eradicate the idea of providers and recipients until the walls of conflict and division are finally torn down. Our charge is to move beyond a service of those on the margins of our world to a solidarity where our heart is in the right place. And when we do this, we are brought to a place of community, where our feet are in the right place, where we link arms and march with, not in front of or behind, but beside each other, on our own particular journey, at our own particular pace. I remember someone commented to a sister once saying, "You're more about the spirit over doctrine and rules, aren't you?" And she said, "Of course I am. I'm Dominican." And another sister who works at a soup kitchen was asked, "Shouldn't you be emphasizing the role of the church and what people should be doing, and what is right and what is wrong, instead of just serving soup?" To which she replied, "My role is not to judge. My role is to accompany." A reminder that our responsibility is not to stand in judgment of those on the margins, but in awe of them. Because over the last 2 years, the people who have inspired me most are the Arise members. Those who are so often denied a seat at the table of God's abundance. The people who have told me, "I may not be able to read, I may not be able to speak English, but I know my rights, and I will stand up for them." Or, after his second case of wage theft in as many years, Edgar searched for his employer who had disappeared for months across the city of Chicago until he found him and received the money he so rightfully earned. Amazing. People who are so mistreated and taken advantage of and come to Arise with their head hanging low and shoulders slouched over. But then, when we all understand that we are exactly the people our God meant us to be, there is dignity. There is empowerment that lasts a lifetime, reshaping the landscape and sweeping away barriers it seemed would stand forever. Jesus preached the good news to the outcast, not only to show the injustice of the economic systems, but integral to the message was that they would be outcast no longer, that they would be abused and discriminated against no longer. We turn away from these teachings every day when we perpetuate profit over people and rules over relationships. We have become so lost that 89% of fast food workers nationwide do not receive the pay they have earned. A $200 billion industry participates in systemic wage theft to its low-wage employees. The rich are literally stealing from the poor. Instead of worrying about the bottom line, we must first and foremost concern ourselves and stand with those who line the bottom. Being a true follower of Jesus is a radical idea, and the most revolutionary thing about it is our call to listen to our heart, because our heart can do what our brain cannot. By listening to our heart, we move from a place of simply praying to a place of community, of rolling up our sleeves and living out our prayer. The most significant lesson I've learned from the Arisers and sisters about how to live my life is that through their ministry, these men and women have declared that it is to you, the immigrant and refugee, those who are rejected and told too often that they just don't matter, that tearing families apart because of a system we created is not our problem, but yours. It is to you, the worker, not only here in the United States, but in India, Bangladesh, and all over the world. where the global economy has created wealth disparities and working conditions that is a great sin of our time. It is to you, the student, in grammar school, high school, college, and adult learners who have been educated by sisters for hundreds and hundreds of years, and the list goes on and on. These men and women have declared once and for all that it is to you that I have given my life, but more importantly, and more inspiring, it is to you that I have given my heart. Suddenly Dominican, suddenly an Ariser, exactly right. Finally, to the sisters and to the Arisers, I love being a DP and an Ariser. It has been the greatest joy of my life. To the sisters, you have inspired me and taught me so much that before being Christians, we have to be people. That there is no first world or third world, but only one world. And to my Arisers, you have transformed my consciousness in ways I never dreamed possible. Know that there is no other place I would rather stand than with all of you. Your work is moving us closer to a day when the margins themselves will be no more. So all I can say is thank you. Thank you. Arise, shine, for our light has come, and the glory of the Lord is upon us. And may God, Creator, bless you. May God, Redeemer, heal you. And may God, the Holy Spirit, fill you with light, so that all may be well and all may be one. Thank you so much.